Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm 34, been married to my husband for 5 years now, and we've had our share of ups and downs like any couple. The biggest challenge in our marriage hasn't been money or career stress, it's been his mother. My husband and I met in college and dated for 3 years before getting married. He's always been close to his family, which I respected and even admired at first. My own family was pretty distant, so seeing how much he cared about his parents seemed sweet. What I didn't realize was that his mother had never really let go of being the most important woman in his life. From our wedding day onward, she made it clear that I was an outsider who somehow stole her precious son. She'd make little comments about how I cooked differently than she did, how I decorated our home, even how I folded towels. My husband would just shrug it off and tell me she meant well, that she was just old-fashioned. I tried to keep the peace because I love him and didn't want to cause problems in his family. The topic of children has always been complicated for us. We've been trying for over 2 years now, and it's been emotionally draining. We've seen doctors, tried different approaches, and it's just not happening yet. It's something we only discuss with each other and our close friends. We decided early on not to share our struggles with extended family because it felt too personal and we didn't want the pressure or unwanted advice. His mother has always made subtle digs about when we'd give her grandchildren. She'd buy baby clothes as gifts and leave them prominently displayed in our guest room when she visited. She'd ask pointed questions at family dinners about our plans and make comments about my biological clock while looking directly at me. My husband would change the subject, but he never directly told her to stop. Last month, she called and announced she was coming to visit for a week. Not asked, announced. She said she needed a break from her daily routine and wanted to spend quality time with her son. My husband was excited and immediately started planning activities they could do together. I suggested he take some time off work so they could have proper mother-son bonding time, but he said he couldn't because of an important project deadline. That meant I'll be home with her for most of the week since I work remotely. She arrived on a Sunday afternoon with 2 large suitcases for what was supposed to be a 7-day visit. The moment she walked through our door, something felt different. She looked around our living room like she was inspecting it and made a comment about how the place could use some proper organizing. She told me the couch was in the wrong spot and that it blocked the natural flow of the room. I explained that we liked it where it was because it faced the TV and got good light from the window. She said she supposed I was still learning about these things. That should have been my first warning sign. The next morning, I woke up early to make coffee and found her already in the kitchen. She'd apparently decided to make herself breakfast and had used every pan we owned. Eggs were stuck to one skillet, there was flour everywhere from what looked like pancake attempts, and she'd somehow managed to get syrup on the counter, stovetop, and even the wall. She told me she was glad I was up and complained that the kitchen was so poorly organized that she couldn't find anything. I offered to show her where things were and mentioned that the coffee was ready. She said that would be helpful, and then casually mentioned that she'd made a bit of a mess and asked if I could clean it up when I got a chance. She said it so casually, like it was completely normal to expect me to clean up after her. I spent 45 minutes scrubbing sticky syrup off surfaces while she sat in the living room watching the morning news. Tuesday was worse. I came downstairs to find she'd decided to reorganize our spice cabinet because it wasn't logical. All my carefully labeled containers were mixed up, and she'd thrown away several items she deemed expired even though they were perfectly fine. She told me she'd fixed my spice situation and that I'd thank her later. When I said she didn't need to do that and that I had everything organized the way I liked it, she insisted that her way made much more sense and that young people don't understand proper kitchen management. I spent my lunch break putting everything back the way it was. By Wednesday, I was exhausted. She'd started leaving her dishes wherever she finished eating. The coffee table, the counter, sometimes even on the stairs. When I gently suggest she put them in the dishwasher, she'd act confused and say she forgot where things went in our kitchen. Thursday morning, I decided to have a calm conversation with my husband before he left for work. I told him his mother seemed to expect me to clean up after her constantly and asked if he could maybe talk to her about helping out a bit. He said she was just not used to being in someone else's space and that she'd adjust. I pointed out that it had been 4 days and that yesterday she'd left a plate of half-eaten toast on our bedroom dresser. He promised he'd mention something to her, but he didn't. That evening at dinner, she started talking about how some women just naturally know how to take care of a household, while others need more practice. The whole time she was looking directly at me. Friday was the breaking point. I was in our laundry room sorting through a week's worth of clothes when she walked in carrying a basket of her dirty laundry. She didn't say anything, just set it down right next to my clean clothes that I was folding and walked out. I stared at that basket for a full minute. Her underwear was sitting right on top, and I could smell that she'd worn the same shirt for multiple days. The assumption that I would just automatically wash her personal items made my hands shake with anger. I finished folding my clothes, put them away, and loaded my dirty items into the washing machine. When the cycle finished, I moved everything to the dryer and started the new load of our towels and sheets. Her basket sat untouched in the corner. Later that afternoon, I found her in the kitchen making another elaborate mess with what appeared to be an attempt at homemade soup. I politely told her that the washing machine was free now if she wanted to use it. She looked at me like I'd said something completely unreasonable and asked if I wasn't supposed to help her. Then she said that, after all, a barren lady should at least be humble. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my face get hot and my vision blur for a second. All the little comments, all the passive-aggressive behavior, all the treating me like hired help. It had all been building up to this moment where she felt comfortable enough to attack the most painful part of my life. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply excused myself for a moment. I walked upstairs to the guest room where she'd been staying. I pulled out both of her suitcases and started packing her clothes as neatly as I could manage with shaking hands. Her toiletries from our bathroom, her books from the nightstand, even the ugly decorative pillow she'd brought from her house, everything went into those bags. I carried both suitcases downstairs and set them by the front door. She was still in the kitchen, apparently having no idea what was coming. I told her I'd packed her things and that she needed to leave. She asked what I was talking about and reminded me she was staying until Sunday. I said not anymore and explained that she'd just called me barren and suggested I should be grateful to serve her because of it. I told her she was done in my house. She claimed she was just trying to give me some perspective and accused me of being way too sensitive. I simply told her to get out. She started arguing, saying I was overreacting and that she'd tell my husband how rude I was being to his mother. I just stood by the door with my arms crossed, not engaging with any of it. When my husband got home 2 hours later, his mother was gone. She'd called an Uber and left, but not before sending him a series of texts about how I'd attacked her for no reason and thrown her out like garbage. My husband asked what had happened, explaining that his mother was at a hotel downtown and hysterical. I told him everything. The comment about being barren, the week of treating me like a servant, all of it. For the first time in our marriage, I watched his face change when he really understood what his mother had been doing. He asked me to repeat what she'd said about me being barren. I told him those were her exact words, said right after I told her she could do her own laundry. He said he needed to call her. He spent an hour on the phone with her. I could hear her voice through the speaker, loud and defensive, insisting she'd done nothing wrong. When he hung up, he looked exhausted. He told me she wanted him to make me apologize. I said that wasn't happening. He assured me he knew that and explained that he'd told her she owed me an apology and that she couldn't come back here until she gave me a real one. 3 weeks later, we're still waiting for that apology. She's been calling my husband daily, trying to convince him that I'm keeping him from his family and that she was just trying to help me become a better wife. She even got her sister to call and tell him he was being controlled by a manipulative woman. But my husband finally sees what I've been dealing with for 5 years. He told his mother that until she can treat me with basic respect, she's not welcome in our home. He's also started standing up to her in ways he never did before. Last week, she called during dinner and started her usual routine of subtle insults and guilt trips. My husband put her on speaker without telling her. She complained that I clearly didn't understand family dynamics and claimed she was just trying to bond with me. My husband pointed out that she'd called me barren and expected me to do her laundry, explaining that wasn't bonding. She insisted she never said that word. My husband confirmed that yes, she did, and even if she hadn't, she'd been treating me like a servant since she arrived. She claimed she didn't know where he was getting these ideas and accused me of poisoning him against her. My husband explained that I didn't have to poison him against anything because he'd heard her himself on that phone call 3 weeks ago when she told him I needed to learn my place. The line went quiet for almost 30 seconds. Then she stammered that wasn't what she meant. My husband told her he thought they needed to take a break from these calls until she was ready to apologize to me sincerely. Then he hung up on her. She hasn't called back since. When I met my wife 3 years ago, she knew I was particular about these things. Usually it wasn't a problem since she's pretty reasonable about most stuff. We've been married for about a year now, and living together has been mostly smooth sailing. She's got her quirks, and I've got mine. One of her quirks is that she gets really excited about trying new recipes she finds online. She spends hours scrolling through cooking videos and food blogs, making lists of things she wants to try. I actually love this about her, because I'm not much of a cook myself, and she makes some incredible meals. This morning started like any other Tuesday. She was buzzing around the kitchen with her phone looking at some recipe she'd found for a one-pot chicken dish with orzo pasta. She seemed really excited about it. She told me she was going to order groceries online for this new recipe and that it looked amazing. I asked her what was in it, and she explained it was chicken, orzo, some vegetables, and herbs. She said it was supposed to be really easy and delicious. She placed the order around 9 a.m. and headed out to pick up the groceries at 11. I was working from home, so I heard her come back around noon, making several trips from the car to unload everything. Then she announced she was going for a walk with her friends and would start cooking when she got back. Around 5:30, she returned from her walk. I could hear her in the kitchen getting things ready. The familiar sounds of pots clattering and the fridge opening and closing. Then suddenly, I heard her yell from the kitchen, asking where the hell the chicken had gone. I paused my laptop and called back, asking if she forgot to order it. She said she definitely ordered it, and that there was supposed to be a whole chicken somewhere. I could hear her opening cabinets and checking the fridge again. After about 10 minutes of searching, she came into the living room looking frustrated. She told me she found it and that it was still in the car. When I asked where in the car, she explained it was in the boot and that she must have missed it when she was unloading. My stomach dropped. It had been a decent day weather-wise, probably around 60 degrees, and our car had been sitting in direct sunlight in the driveway all afternoon. That's over 5 hours. I asked how long it was out there, and she said since she got back at noon, but she said it was fine because it was still cool to the touch. She headed back to the kitchen, and I could hear her unwrapping the chicken. I followed her and watched when she started preparing it. The chicken didn't look warm exactly, but it definitely wasn't cold either. I told her I didn't think we should eat that chicken. She brushed me off, saying it was fine and not even warm. I pointed out that it had been sitting in a hot car for 5 hours, but she just said that we were eating the chicken. I went back to the couch and pulled out my phone. A quick search confirmed what I already suspected. Leaving raw chicken at room temperature for more than 2 hours is asking for trouble. In a car that's been sitting in the sun, even worse. I returned to the kitchen where she was still prepping the meal. I explained that I had looked it up and we really shouldn't eat chicken that's been left out that long. She dismissed my concerns again, saying we were eating the chicken because she had already started cooking. I suggested a compromise. She could eat it if she wanted, but I would just make myself a sandwich or something. She refused this idea, saying she made this meal for both of us and we were both going to eat it. I explained that I wasn't comfortable eating potentially unsafe food, but she called me ridiculous and said that the chicken was fine. This back and forth continued for another 10 minutes. She kept saying the chicken was safe while I kept explaining why I didn't want to risk food poisoning. Finally, I tried a different approach. I told her that I appreciated that she wanted to make this meal for me, but I just wasn't going to eat it. I said I felt like she was trying to force me to eat something against my will. That's when she completely lost it. She angrily said that if I was going to be such a baby about it, she would go get another chicken. She walked out of the house, leaving me standing in the kitchen with half-prepared ingredients scattered everywhere. I heard the car start, and she peeled out of the driveway. About an hour later, she returned with a new chicken and a furious expression. She didn't say a word to me when she started the whole cooking process over again. The silent treatment continued through dinner, which I have to admit was delicious with a fresh chicken. The next morning I woke up feeling fine. She, however, spent most of the day in the bathroom. Turns out she had used the same cutting board and knife for the new chicken that she'd used for the potentially contaminated one, without washing them properly in between. When she finally emerged from the bathroom around noon looking pale and miserable, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop. I asked how she was feeling, and she said she felt terrible and thought she had food poisoning. I replied that it was unfortunate. She accused me of sounding smug about it, so I said that I wasn't being smug and just said it was unfortunate that this happened. She looked at me and shuffled back to bed. I continued working, occasionally hearing her make trips to the bathroom throughout the day. By evening, she was feeling a bit better but still queasy. She came into the living room where I was watching TV and told me she owed me an apology. I asked what for, and she explained it was for trying to make me eat that chicken and for getting angry when I was just being sensible. I told her I appreciated that, and she said she just really wanted to make that recipe work, and I acknowledged that I knew that. I also mentioned that it was delicious when she made it with a fresh chicken. We ordered takeout that night, and she's been much more careful about food safety ever since. She still gets excited about new recipes, but now she double checks that she's got all the ingredients properly stored before starting to cook. The funny thing is, she never did admit that the first chicken might have been the problem. She's convinced it was cross-contamination from not washing the cutting board properly. I didn't push the point, sometimes being right isn't worth the argument. My sister has been using a wheelchair for 3 years now after a car accident left her paralyzed from the waist down. She's incredibly strong and independent, but sometimes the world reminds us both just how cruel people can be. My sister and I are really close. After her accident, I made it my mission to help her get back to living her life fully. She was always the adventurous one between us, always trying new restaurants and experiences. The accident took that away from her for a while because she was dealing with depression and the physical challenges of adapting to her new reality. For her birthday this year, she specifically asked to go to this upscale French restaurant downtown that had just opened. She'd been working really hard in physical therapy and wanted to celebrate feeling more confident about going out in public again. I was so proud of her for taking this step, and I was determined to make it a perfect evening. We got all dressed up and arrived at the restaurant right on time for our reservation. The place was fancy with dim lighting and cloth napkins. I could see my sister was nervous but excited. We walked up to the hostess stand where this middle-aged woman with perfectly styled hair and an expensive-looking suit was standing. I politely told her we had a reservation for 2 under my last name for 7 o'clock. The hostess, who I'll call Karen, looked at my sister in her wheelchair and her whole expression changed. She got this disgusted look on her face like we'd just tracked mud through her pristine restaurant. Karen told us she was sorry but didn't think they could accommodate us that night. I asked her what she meant since we had a reservation, and their website said they were accessible. She explained that while they were technically accessible, they were very busy and she wasn't sure they had the right table available. I could see my sister's face starting to fall. She'd been so excited about this dinner, and this woman was about to ruin it before we'd even been seated. I asked her to please check since we'd been looking forward to this for weeks. Karen reluctantly looked at her reservation book, making a big show of flipping through pages. She said she supposed she could seat us, but it would have to be at a table in the back corner near the staff room. She claimed it was the only spot where a wheelchair would fit without disrupting other guests' dining experience. My sister spoke up then, and I could hear the hurt in her voice. She asked why her wheelchair would disrupt anyone's experience since she was just there to have dinner like everyone else. Karen explained that this was a high-end establishment where other patrons came for a certain atmosphere and experience. She said having a wheelchair visible in the main dining room might make some people uncomfortable. I felt my blood boiling. I asked if she was seriously telling us that she wanted to hide my sister away because her disability might upset other customers. Karen insisted she was trying to find a solution that worked for everyone. She said the corner table was perfectly fine and that we'd have privacy without having to worry about being in anyone's way. My sister said she didn't want to be hidden away and just wanted to eat dinner like any other paying customer. Karen told us that if we didn't like the accommodation she was offering, we were welcome to leave and find somewhere else to eat. That's when I knew this had crossed the line from poor customer service into outright discrimination. I pulled out my phone and told her I was calling the police to report discrimination against a disabled person and then filing a complaint with the city's Human Rights Commission. Karen protested that I couldn't do that because she had offered us a table. I explained that she had offered to segregate my sister because of her disability, which was illegal. I dialed 911 and explained the situation. The operator took it seriously and said officers would be there shortly. While we waited, other customers started noticing the commotion. Some of them came over to ask what was happening, and when I explained, they were horrified. One older gentleman spoke up and said it was absolutely unacceptable. He mentioned he'd been coming to restaurants for 70 years and had never heard anything so disgusting. A young couple with a baby also chimed in, saying they were leaving right away because they wouldn't spend their money somewhere that treated people like this. By the time the police arrived, about half the dining room had emptied out. The officers listened to our story and then spoke with Karen. They explained that what she was doing violated the Americans with Disabilities Act and that she could face serious legal repercussions. One officer told Karen that refusing service or segregating customers based on disability was a federal crime and that the establishment could lose its business license. Karen tried to backtrack, insisting she never refused service and had offered us a table. The officer explained that forcing someone to sit in a segregated area because of their disability was still discrimination and that we had every right to file charges. The officer was right. We filed a formal complaint with the city, and I also posted about the experience on social media. The story went viral within hours. The restaurant's phone was ringing constantly with people calling to complain. The real satisfaction came 3 days later when I got a call from the restaurant's actual owner. Turns out Karen wasn't just a hostess. She was the general manager, and she'd been making these kinds of decisions without the owner's knowledge. The owner told me he was deeply sorry for what happened and that the behavior was completely against everything they stood for. He wanted me to know that the manager had been terminated immediately and they were implementing mandatory disability awareness training for all staff. But it got even better. A week later, I saw in the local newspaper that Karen was facing criminal charges for disability discrimination. The district attorney decided to prosecute because there had been other complaints about her behavior at previous restaurants where she'd worked. After 4 years of pulling all-nighters, surviving on instant noodles, and drowning in student debt, I finally made it. College graduation was behind me, and honestly, I felt like I could conquer the world. My dad was over the moon when I walked across that stage. He kept saying how proud he was and told me we needed to celebrate properly with a party at his house. Nothing too crazy, just friends and family to celebrate my big achievement. I was thrilled. After years of cramped dorm parties and cheap beer in plastic cups, having a real celebration at Dad's place sounded perfect. The thing is, Dad remarried about 3 years ago. His new wife moved in pretty quickly, and while she's never been outright mean to me, she's always felt cold. Like I'm some kind of inconvenience that comes with the package deal of marrying my father. But this was my graduation party, so I pushed those thoughts aside and dove into planning. I spent 2 weeks organizing everything. I made the guest list, reached out to my college friends, my high school buddies who were still in town, and some family members. I coordinated with everyone about timing, sent out proper invitations, and even created a group chat to keep everyone updated. The day before the party, I went grocery shopping and spent nearly $300 of my own money on food. I'm talking about the good stuff too, not just chips and dip. I bought ingredients for a taco bar, fancy cheeses, crackers, fresh fruit, and enough alcohol to keep everyone happy. Dad offered to pay, but I wanted to contribute something meaningful to my own celebration. The morning of the party, I showed up at Dad's house at 9 in the morning to start setting up. I spent hours arranging tables, setting up the taco bar, organizing drinks, and making sure everything looked perfect. Dad helped where he could, but I could tell his wife wasn't thrilled about the whole thing. She kept walking around the house sighing loudly and making comments about how much work parties were. When guests started arriving around 6, the energy was incredible. My college roommate drove 4 hours just to be there. My best friend from high school brought her new boyfriend. Even my cousin, who never goes to family events, showed up. Everyone was mingling, laughing, and genuinely having a great time. People kept congratulating me and asking about my job prospects. It felt amazing to be surrounded by all these people who cared about me. Dad was in his element too, playing host and telling embarrassing stories about my childhood to anyone who would listen. He kept refilling drinks and making sure everyone had enough food. You could tell he was genuinely happy to see me celebrating this milestone. But throughout all of this, my stepmother was like a dark cloud hovering in the corner. She barely spoke to any of my friends when they tried to include her in conversations. When my roommate complimented her on the house decorations, she just nodded and walked away. She didn't eat any of the food I prepared and kept checking her phone like she had somewhere better to be. About 2 hours into the party, I was in the kitchen refilling the ice bucket when she appeared beside me. The kitchen was kind of tucked away from the main party area, so it was just the two of us. She asked me how much longer my friends were planning to stay because she kinda wanted the house back to herself. I literally stopped mid-scoop with the ice. I thought maybe I'd misheard her. I asked her what she meant and she explained that my friends needed to leave soon because she'd had a really long week at work and needed some peace and quiet to unwind. I reminded her that it was my graduation party, but she just shrugged like that was completely irrelevant information. She said she knew but was tired and needed her space. I felt my face getting hot. Here I was, celebrating one of the biggest achievements of my life, surrounded by people who drove hours to be here, and she wanted them gone because she was tired. I told her that if she needed space to unwind, she was welcome to go upstairs or even leave for a while. I mentioned that I had paid for most of the food and all the wine anyway, so the party was going to continue. She asked if I was being serious and reminded me that this was her house too. I replied that yes, it was her house, but it was also my graduation party that Dad had offered to host. I suggested that if she couldn't handle people celebrating in the living room for one night, maybe she should find somewhere else to be. She stared at me for a long moment, then huffed like an angry bull and stormed off toward the bedroom. The door slam was so loud that a few people in the living room turned to look in that direction. My friend from college raised an eyebrow at me, but I just shook my head and grabbed the wine bottle from the counter. For the next hour, the party continued without any issues. If anything, the energy got even better. People were telling college stories. We started up a game of charades, and someone brought out a guitar. But I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sure enough, around 10 o'clock, Dad emerged from the hallway, looking a little sheepish. He told me that my stepmother was trying to sleep because she had an early morning tomorrow. I thought he was about to ask everyone to leave, but then he asked if we could just keep the music down a notch while making it clear that we shouldn't stop the party because this was my night. Then he handed me another bottle of wine from his personal collection, the expensive stuff he usually saves for special occasions. He mentioned that she was already asleep anyway and that I'd worked too hard for this moment to cut it short. The relief I felt was incredible. My friends and I exchanged looks and tried not to laugh too loudly. We turned the music down to a reasonable level, but the party kept going strong. If anything, having to be a little quieter made everyone feel more connected. We ended up talking until almost 2 in the morning, sharing stories and making plans for staying in touch after graduation. My college roommate crashed on the couch, and my best friend from high school stayed in the guest room. The next morning, we all helped clean up together, and the house looked better than when we started. Dad made breakfast for everyone, and we spent another few hours just hanging out before people had to drive home. When I was 22, I had just finished my paramedic training and landed my first job at a small hospital-based emergency medical service. Being fresh out of school, I was eager to learn everything I could and improve my skills whenever possible. Between ambulance calls, I made it a habit to hang around different departments in the hospital, the emergency room, orthopedic clinic, and day surgery unit. I figured any extra practice I could get would make me a better paramedic. The nursing staff, who were all women at this particular hospital, were incredibly welcoming and patient with me. I tried to make myself useful by helping with tasks like changing bed linens and restocking supplies. I also became their unofficial coffee delivery guy, making runs to the cafeteria whenever they needed a caffeine fix. In return, they let me observe procedures, practice basic medical skills, and taught me techniques I wouldn't have learned otherwise. It was a great arrangement that benefited everyone. My parents had both immigrated to this country when they were young, so I grew up understanding the challenges that come with adapting to a new culture. I've always believed that people should be welcomed and given opportunities to succeed, regardless of where they come from. What I don't tolerate, however, is bringing discriminatory attitudes from other places and expecting everyone else to accommodate them. That brings me to the incident that still makes me chuckle years later. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when a man came into the orthopedic clinic to have his cast removed. He was probably in his 30s and had recently moved to our country. From what I gathered, he had broken his arm a few weeks earlier and was finally ready to get the cast off. Right from the start, this guy made it clear that he had issues with the female nursing staff. When the head nurse approached him to check him in, he completely ignored her and looked around the room expectantly. The nurse tried to verify his information before they could proceed with the cast removal, but he acted like she hadn't spoken at all. When the doctor made his rounds and briefly stopped by to check the patient's chart, the man immediately perked up. The patient told the doctor that finally someone qualified was here and asked when the doctor would be removing his cast. The doctor explained that their nursing staff handles cast removals and that they're all certified and very experienced with the procedure. The patient protested loudly, saying he needed someone qualified to do this properly and dismissing the nurses with a wave of his hand. The doctor explained that he had other patients to see and that the nurses were more than capable of handling a simple cast removal. But this guy wasn't having it. The patient demanded someone with proper qualifications, claiming this was a medical procedure that required expertise. The nurses exchanged looks. I could see they were getting frustrated, but they remained professional. One of them tried again to explain that they removed dozens of casts every week and that the procedure was completely routine and safe. The patient refused to have what he called unqualified people working on him and demanded the doctor or someone else who actually knew what they were doing. That's when I decided to step in. I had assisted with cast removals many times during my training and had done several on my own in the ambulance when patients needed emergency cast cuts due to swelling or circulation issues. It really is one of the simpler medical procedures you can do. I excused myself and told him I could handle the cast removal if he'd prefer. His whole demeanor changed instantly when he saw me. Suddenly he was all smiles and cooperation. The patient thanked me and said finally someone qualified was here. I told him it was great and that I'd get the cast saw ready so we could have him out of there in no time. I could see the nurses watching from the doorway, and I caught one of them rolling her eyes. They knew exactly what was happening here. This guy assumed that because I was male, I must be more qualified than the female nurses who had years more experience than me. When I started cutting through the cast, he visibly relaxed and even started making small talk. The patient thanked me for doing this properly and said it was good to finally have someone who knew what they were doing. That comment really got under my skin. These nurses had been nothing but kind and professional, and here was this guy insulting their competence based on nothing but their gender. I decided he needed a little reality check. I told him I wasn't sure what he meant by qualified, explaining that I was just a paramedic who drove an ambulance and that this was actually my first time removing a cast at this clinic. The change in his expression was immediate. His eyes went wide and he started shifting nervously in his chair. The patient asked what I meant about it being my first time and said he thought I was qualified. I clarified that I never said I was qualified and that he had just assumed I was because I'm a man. I kept cutting through the cast like nothing had changed, but I could see him getting more anxious by the second. The patient told me to stop and said he didn't want someone inexperienced doing this, worried that I might hurt him. I asked if he would prefer that I get one of those qualified women to finish the job. He went quiet at that suggestion. I could practically see the gears turning in his head. He weighed his options: either let the unqualified paramedic continue or admit that the female nurses he had dismissed were actually the better choice. The patient just told me to be very careful. I reassured him that the cast saw couldn't actually cut skin, explaining that it just vibrates and breaks through the plaster, and showing him how it just tickles by running it lightly across my own hand. He watched nervously but didn't say anything else. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was more worried about a simple, harmless procedure now that he knew the person doing it wasn't experienced, the nurses he had rejected. The rest of the cast removal went smoothly, though he jumped every time the saw made contact with the cast. When I finally cracked it open and removed the pieces, his arm looked perfectly fine underneath. I told him we were all done and that the nurses would give him some instructions for caring for his arm now that it was out of the cast. He thanked me, though his tone was much more subdued now. When I cleaned up the equipment, I noticed him actually listening respectfully when one of the nurses explained how to gradually build up strength in his arm. Later, when I was restocking the ambulance, the head nurse found me in the parking lot. She commented that what happened in there was quite a performance. I told her I figured he needed to learn that assumptions can be dangerous. She said mission accomplished and asked if I saw how nervous he got. I mentioned that those cast saws are designed specifically not to cut skin, so he was worried about nothing. The nurse laughed and said next time someone questioned their qualifications, she was sending them straight to me. We both laughed about it, but the incident stuck with me. It was a perfect example of how prejudice can cloud judgment and lead people to make poor decisions. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.